Fatima Mohammadi, and she's here.
Actually, I think I know Fatima. I just want to make sure I got all the names written down so I. Okay. I'm always here. You listening? Hello. Are you good? I'm moderator. Yeah. I don't have a particular dog other than the American media. What's that?
Rick, are you here? Rick Hellman?
You remember me? Oh, man. It has been. JKFI.
I'm Jeff. I'll be the moderator. Yes, it has been a while. Thought that was except the TV members seem to be on the
last thing here, right?
Oh, was it the radio?
She's actually here tonight. She's just leaving.
See, we'll see whether I can bird cats or not.
This is a good way to win this.
What's that? Okay, good. I'm ready. Oh, you're ready. So, yeah.
Okay, could we get back into our seats, please? Don't forget that there are index cards out in the lobby on the literature table. If you'd rather ask your questions on an index card, please do that. We also have a mic up front if you'd like to talk that way.
Did you leave?
I got it.
I went to watch in the back.
I'm staying, man. If you have KC,
Did you work?
3, 2, 1.
Yeah. Can we have the people from the lobby please come in? We need to get moving. Thank you. Running a little behind. We have one more panel member, but she is, she's here. Okay. She has a baby that occasionally demands her attention. So so first of all, I'd like to introduce the pastor of the church, Kendall Gibbons, to introduce, to welcome us to the church.
Good evening. We're very pleased that you're here with us tonight. And first of all, my apologies for the confusion over the technology of running the video, and also for the fact that we are in the midst of having all our air handling ducts replaced. So it is not normally this uncomfortable in this room, and we're glad that you're here anyway. I need to let you know that there are members of our congregation who are deeply troubled by the fact that we've seen this movie tonight, and other members of the congregation who are deeply troubled by what we've seen in the movie here tonight. We represent a broad spectrum of faith stances. Our congregation has no creed of beliefs that everyone must share. We are more about the questions that go with trying to live an authentic life of joy and service in this fast-paced and sometimes confusing world. And we hope that all of you are here to participate in that project too. So welcome.
I also wanted to mention and thank the Friends of Community Media, which has helped us greatly with organizing this event, and to the Social Responsibility Board here at All Souls. A brief introduction to our panel, and then we'll have a presentation by each member. Many of you know Sam Mann. He's a retired pastor of St. Mark's. He's at the end of the table. He worked there, he preached there for 43 years to an all-black congregation. He's a longtime civil rights advocate, marched with Martin Luther King Jr. and protested against the Vietnam War, South African apartheid, and many other things. He's past president of the Kansas City chapter of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. Rick Hellman, sitting next to Sam, works in the Public Relations Department at the University of Kansas, is also a freelance journalist, and I'm sure you've seen some of his articles in the Kansas City Star or other publications. He was a former editor of the Jewish Chronicle and is on the board of the Jewish Community Relations Bureau. And Peter Murillo at the end, Associate Professor of Broadcast Journalism at UMKC. He spent 14 years in Europe as a producer and special correspondent for the PBS program European Journal. He covered the emerging democracies of Eastern and Central Europe, the breakup of the Soviet Union, war in Bosnia, and famine relief efforts in Somalia, with a special focus on media ethics. He has won several awards for his documentaries. And far end of the table, Fatima Mohammadi, a legal consultant who specializes in civil and criminal litigation, dispute resolution. She was a human rights official in Idaho. In May 2010, Fatima was on board the Mavi Marmara, the largest of a six-ship Freedom Flotilla, which was attacked by Israel while trying to relieve Israel's blockade of Gaza, an attack which resulted in the death of 9 people, including one 19-year-old Turkish American. Our moderator, here he is, Jeff Humfeld, is the executive producer of Jaws of Justice Radio, a weekly program on KKFI Community Radio that focuses on criminal justice issues. He's on the board of Consolidated Social Work Services, a change agent working in the Oak Park neighborhood on the east side of Kansas City, Missouri. And he's also a member of Missouri CURE Cure, a nonprofit that advocates for the humane treatment of prisoners in the Missouri Department of Corrections. He's also a member of Friends of Community Media. We'll ask each panel member to give a brief, 4-minute reaction to the film, a commentary on the film, and then we'll be open for questions from the audience, either, as I said, in written form, if you wish, or the microphone in front will be turned on. Thank you. And we'll start in the order I just introduced them. So okay. Sam.
So Rick was first, right?
Sam.
Oh, Sam.
Rick.
And Peter. I got you.
Peter. You fed him.
All right. Sam? Reverend Mann, would you like to make your comments first, please?
They're very short. I'm retired, as you know. When you retire, you retire. I want to say it's a very difficult issue for me, but I'm going to come in as a theologian and not an activist. Sometimes there are differences, not in my estimation, but they are. The one thing I can say is that God does not give promised lands. It's not in my theology. There's no such thing as a land given to a people. The United States tried to adopt this theological position with a doctrine called manifest destiny. It bred the trail of tears and the total incarceration of a people. To say that Israel belongs to Israel because God did it, in my estimation, is a lie. So that as a theologian, my estimation about God and land is this: the earth is the Lord's, the fullness thereof, and all those that dwell therein. So everybody has access to the land. Everybody has access to the water, and we all are about the business of enjoying what God has given to us, regardless of who you are. The other thing I want to say, too, I also am a follower of Jesus. I am not a Christian. I'm a follower of Jesus. There's a difference. There's a big difference. And there's some Christians that got some beliefs that are absolutely absurd. Like white people are God's chosen people. That's a Christian belief, and the evangelicals harp on it every day. But what I'm trying to say is this: that God, when God blessed Abraham with land, God said to Abraham, "Abraham, I'm going to give you this, not so you can be a great nation and blah, blah, and blah, but so you can bless others." So whenever we get land, whenever we get blessings, it's about the possibility of blessing somebody else. So right now in this world, it seems to me like, and I didn't mean to preach, but I've been going on, but it seems to me like we have the capacity to destroy ourselves totally. We have the capacity to feed, clothe, and employ everybody totally. And it ought to be about time that we paid attention to that and cut out this damn nationalism and this is my land and we're going to fight for it. And then the last thing I say, Jesus was a nonviolent person who refused to pick up a weapon, and anybody believes that Jesus would have carried a pistol is a lie.
Next, we'll hear from Rick, please.
Hi, I'm Rick Hellman. It's tough for me to sort of address this movie. I could be here all night addressing what I consider to be the lies and the omissions and the mischaracterizations therein. I think the film has an amazing Orwellian ability to make the black white and the up down, and to turn terrorists into freedom fighters. And I think it's deeply dishonest, and it's personally offensive to me, particularly in the way that this film waves away Hamas' violent, virulent anti-Semitism, violence, and terrorism. They don't really try to deny it because it's impossible. Somebody bombed the Dolphinarium disco, and somebody bombed the bus, but they minimize it. They say that this covenant is obscure, and it's small, and it's repealed, and it's effectively omitted. But I can read you this article from last year. Senior Hamas leader Quran tells us to drive Jews out of Palestine's entirety. Did you hear the story this week from Mahmoud Abbas, the supposed moderate leader of the PLO, and the anti-Semitic things he said about the Holocaust? That Jews are responsible for their own genocide by being moneylenders? Look it up. On Google News, you don't even have to go very far. This film mentioned the Nakba. There was no mention of the forgotten refugees. Do you know that more Jews have been kicked out of Arab countries than vice versa? Who knows that? Raise your hand. It's absolutely true.
When? In other words, when? Was it after 48?
We'll get to you'll get a chance to ask your questions. Please let him make his comment.
There's been a roughly equal population exchange, so is fair, or do the Jews have to continue paying forever for their sins? I'm not here to say Israel is without sin, or that I support Bibi Netanyahu, because I don't. I'm like a lot of the American Jews that Rashid Khalidi was describing, a liberal, a two-stater. I would just say that the Jewish people have offered to divide this baby over and over again. In 47, in 94, in 2001, in 67. The Arabs are not willing to split this baby. And in the Bible, it's the mother who loves the child who's willing to split the baby in front of Solomon's court.
No, it's the other way around. It's the other way around.
All right.
Keep the baby whole. Well, who's going to compromise?
All right.
Who loves the baby more?
We'll get to the questions yet.
That's enough.
Yep. Peter, are you ready to make some comments there?
Well, first of all, I have my cell phone here. I'm not texting. I promise that I'm not texting. Okay. I just look up. I'm looking up. I am looking up. Let me just take this thing out of here so I feel liberated. Thank you. You see, as a journalist, I was not tethered to anybody. I went by myself. I mean, I worked I worked for PBS. But we never had any money, so we didn't have, anyway. When I covered the war in Bosnia, I tried to tell stories through people, and I don't think enough of that is being done in Israel and in the West Bank and in Gaza. Another thing, if I may add, is I was a Fulbright scholar in Ethiopia twice, and in Swaziland, and my wife, who is Swazi, lived under apartheid for 8 years when she studied in South Africa, and she has a few stories about, and she speaks Zulu and Xhosa, and so she has a few stories, but she is a forgiving person, and I think that at one point there's not enough forgiveness, and I think the moderates have to work together, and there's too much shouting, not enough listening, and in the words that people choose, very often is what divides us. And I think we have to really be careful in the words that we use, because rather than dividing us, we should, and this is what I tell journalists that I teach, because in Swaziland, there were no press freedoms at all. The king there is absolute monarch. He does not like journalists. He doesn't like lawyers either, but he doesn't like journalists because, well, there are a lot of reasons for that. So I wanted to keep journalists out of trouble, because if you lose your job in Swaziland, you will starve. I mean, it's bad enough to lose your job here, but if you lose your job there, that's it. You have to leave. So an example is that in Swaziland, it has the largest AIDS rate in the world per capita. 1 out of every 4 people has AIDS. So instead of arguing with a government minister about the AIDS rate, I just had them do stories about AIDS vans, which were donated by nonprofit groups that people could get free exams. Now in Bosnia, everybody agreed that the citizens there, and I covered the siege of Sarajevo, the victims were Muslim. But the stories that I told were through people. There were Muslim bakers who would get up at 3:30 in the morning, and they would bake bread for the entire population. And you're talking about a city of 350,000 people. There were no schools being run, so there was a math teacher, And she had algebra class, ad hoc algebra class in the basement of a building. And I said, well, are they learning anything? Are these students learning anything? She said, no. But it just keeps them out from being shot because there were 800 snipers just in the city alone. And then the city was surrounded by people shooting. I've seen people killed. I've seen people shot in front of me. It was that bad. About 300,000 people died in this war. And we forget. So
30 seconds.
Okay, thank you. But to wrap it up, there are a lot of ethnic fault lines all over the world. People have forgotten Rwanda very quickly. It was very intense. 800,000 people were killed within 100 days. And I do believe by the language that we use and how we choose as journalists to tell our story, and I'll get back to Rwanda quickly when it's my turn again, that we can do a lot better than what we're doing.
And finally, Fatima.
Right. Actually, I think the film kind of speaks for itself. A lot of people in this room have heard many of the facts that were presented in the film. And for those of you who haven't, it's just the tipping point. This is just the beginning of learning more about a conflict that is more than 70 years in the making and that has literally displaced and murdered hundreds of thousands of people. But in lieu of responding exclusively to the film, I actually wanted to conduct a very short exercise. How many people in this room are actually Palestinian? Can I actually ask you to stand? I know that's a little uncomfortable, but can you please stand? You are the ones who belong up here. Your voice as Palestinians needs to be the one that is centered in these conversations, and it is the one that needs to be centered when we have events like this. And it is a flaw on our part as organizers to not first consider the Palestinian voice. Now, as you are standing, I want everybody who has worked or would like to work for Palestinian liberation to stand, please. These are your allies. We need everybody in this conversation. The table is large enough and the conflict is nuanced enough and important enough that every single person in here, Palestinian and otherwise, has a place and has a position and has a skill set and has a voice that can be lent to this discussion without superseding and overriding the voice of the Palestinian people, which should be at the forefront of this. Thank you so much for standing, and thank you for being here tonight. Now, beyond that, you may ask, well, why are you up here? Right? What am I doing up here as a non-Palestinian when there are, mashallah, wonderful Palestinian activists in this community and people who could speak on behalf of their own stories, their own narrative, and their own experience in dealing with a homeland that actually belongs to them and that they have memories about when I do not. And the exclusive reason for that is that I don't believe that the victim should have to sit with their victimizer. And to have a Zionist on the panel, I apologize if I'm labeling you incorrectly, but to have somebody who expresses Zionist ideas or thoughts or wants to excuse the atrocities committed by the state of Israel and by the people of Israel makes me not wish upon a Palestinian to have to sit up here and deal with that face to face. So I hope that I can correctly and appropriately and sympathetically convey the message of Palestinian friends of mine and other organizers that I've worked with for a very long time in responding to this film and responding to questions and to comments. But I would like to offer anybody, especially Palestinian members of this audience, if you would like to learn how to enhance upon your skills of public speaking and leadership and organizing, there are organizations that are here tonight that would love to plug you in and put you at the forefront, which is where you belong of this conversation and of this situation. So I know that's not 4 minutes, but that's really the most important thing that needs to be said tonight.
All right, we will open up for questions. There's a couple rules here. One is no personal attacks. We're here to discuss the movie, and we want you to. We'll give you about a minute to give your question. At a minute and a half, I'm going to ask you to either give your question or give the microphone to the next person. So,
okay.
First question.
It is an oxymoron to accuse a Palestinian to be anti-Semite.
when Palestinians are Semite people. And you might not be a Semite because you are a European descent, so most likely you're not a Semite. So to say, when Mahmoud Abbas, and I don't like Mahmoud Abbas, but to say, if he criticizes Israel, or say whatever is about Israel, to be an anti-Semite, he cannot be anti himself, okay? Palestinian people are Semite people. But because Semitism is ethnicity, is not a religion. So just because you're a Jew doesn't mean you're a Semite, you know? So that's one fallacy among the Israeli Zionist fallacy. The other thing is, you say that the Jewish people were kicked out of the Arab lands. Tell me when and where, okay? When the migration in Syria, I'm from Syria, when they opened up for the Jews to migrate, 4,000 Jews chose to leave. That's in recent history, you know? That's recent, just like the last few years, okay? So to equate, you know, the migration and the suffering of Palestinians with the suffering of migration, that's really another major fallacy. Okay, the Jews in the Arab countries, when they were given the chance to migrate, and they were given the choice to migrate, and few thousand chose to migrate, but they were not forced to migrate like the Palestinians. They were not massacred to migrate like the Palestinians in Israel.
Okay. All right. Anyone have a response to what the man has said?
I would, rather, in lieu of a long response, I would refer you to the movie The Forgotten Refugees. You can watch it on YouTube. It'll answer all your questions about when this happened, the pogroms that occurred against Jews in Arab lands, the second-class citizens, the dhimmi status, the infidel status, the jizya that they were forced to pay, the persecution of Jews throughout centuries in Arab lands. You'll see it if you watch that movie.
The Muslims listed the Jews from Spain and from Europe over and over again.
Okay.
That's my answer.
Tima, did you have? Let our panelists speak, please.
Just again, very briefly, there have been a lot. There has been in history a lot of hatred and abuse of the Jewish population. There absolutely has. What it does not justify is the abuse and the murder and the colonization and the expulsion of millions, now to date, Palestinians. Yeah, and when we talk about especially the migration, I should say, of Jewish Holocaust survivors, you know, very sympathetically from their land, from their countries into Palestine, that were welcomed at first with open arms until gangs and violent groups started to show their true face in terms of wanting to take over that land and in combining it with the Zionist theology. That is where the problem lay.
Okay.
Hi. I've been very disappointed in the news. Some people call it fake news, but that doesn't mean I'm affiliated with those that call it fake news. But it is fake news. And I was taught to read George Orwell, which you mentioned. When I was 16 years old, it chilled me. We're living that time now. We have the Orwellian spin machine in the media. And I don't think it's any coincidence that George Orwell, in the Ministries of Truth, and the arch enemy he cast as the arch enemy of Big Brother, the protagonist for freedom and freedom of thought, George Orwell named him Emmanuel Goldstein. 9/11 truth, folks. Building 7.
Please do.
I'd like to reply to that.
Yeah, I thought you would.
I'll speak for myself. When I was a correspondent, I didn't report any fake news. I did the best that I could, and I didn't have any filter. Anything that I reported was as true as I could make it, or was a reflection of what I saw. No, I know it didn't. But remember, there's a lot of it is perspective. And if you believe that we live in an Orwellian age, we also live in an age where you can get a lot of access to different sources of news that we haven't had before. You know, you can go online. I mean, I didn't have that when I was a kid. I had to go to the library. I grew up in New York City. I had to take a bus to go to the library. The librarians were always in a bad mood. They didn't want to have to deal with kids. No, really. And you know, I'd find the information. It was wrong. I had to go back. Now, but you can get it very easily. If you don't agree with it, find something else. But the information is out there. And in different languages. I read different language news from different parts of the world. And so let me just say, let me give you this quote from an unlikely source. From the lead singer of the Sex Pistols. He said, "Don't demand to be ignorant." I think too many people demand to be ignorant. I'm not talking about this, you fine people, but I'm talking about a lot of people out there, they don't care. This is what is a problem because people don't consume the news, so therefore they don't question it. They don't and when we don't question our leaders and we don't question the kinds of news that we get, I mean, 9/11 did happen. We did land on the moon. We did. We did.
But it's the narratives, it's the spin on what happened that's important.
I just want to reiterate, when I was in the straight news business and not the advocacy news business, which I felt I was as the editor of the Jewish Chronicle, but I've also worked for Kansas City Star and NBC television station here in town. Nobody tries to spin the news. The reporters are out there trying to do the very level best they can.
Minus what we just saw as far as like the Hasbara campaign, minus that.
Sorry?
I said the half of what we just saw in the movie was about Hasbara, was about documentation, documented evidence that the Israeli government has chosen a particular filter from which all of the stories that exit out of Israel will be seen by the rest of the world. And as we saw over and over again, and which is, like you said, available to all of us, you know, there is a narrative that is given to us as Americans, and there is a narrative that is given to like the allied countries, and then there is the narrative that the rest of the world sees and understands. But beyond narrative are facts. For every one Israeli killed, there are 100 Palestinians.
Okay, well, I think in order for Americans to understand Gaza or the West Bank better, there needs to be better trained American journalists who know Arabic, who understand the culture, who can, with skill, enter the West Bank and Gaza, and to be able to report about things there than to have the news filtered. And I think. Only allowed access. Well, I have a friend. Well, actually, he was my student. And he lives in Jerusalem. He was, he's an American citizen now, but he was Palestinian. And he reports from both. And he has a very good background, and he's quite a resource. And he told me that Hamas, people don't know this, but Hamas opened kindergartens. I mean, I'm just telling you what he has told me, that Hamas has opened kindergartens, that they run clinics. So perhaps if people hear about that, in addition, maybe they do other things that they're not supposed to do, or maybe there are factions within Hamas. And I think people would have a better understanding of what this organization is than what we see, because part of the problem is that there's a lot of parachute journalism, a lot of people, we don't have news bureaus anymore. People go in and out of a country without really understanding it. I'm sorry, there are a lot of questions.
Let's go.
Okay, next question.
So the two different issues I have. The first one is the fundamentalist alliance between Saudi Arabia and Likud, that apparently many people may not have been paying too much attention, but somehow there's a bonding between fundamentalists, no matter what country they're in. And the second question is going back to the 1948 land issue. Apparently, there were a few plans before Plan Dalit. You had the first 2 or 3 plans there that would have been a lot more, I don't know, sympathetic towards leaving Palestinians in place. But by the time Plan Dalit was implemented, many Palestinians were run out of place and then told they could not come back. So I'd like to get a little more clarification on that.
Well, I think that question's directed to me. I don't want to relitigate 1948. again, I would refer you to a book. My favorite book maybe on this whole conflict is called Righteous Victims, and it's by Benny Morris. I think there are righteous victims on both sides of this conflict. And as for the Saudi-Israeli alliance, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, and the enemy is Iran.
And yet Iran allows, actually reserves spaces on their parliament for Jewish members of community that are actually pursuant to the population of Iran, which includes Iranian Jews.
Go ahead.
Sir, I appreciate your statement about living it through the people.
Closer to the microphone, please.
I appreciate your statement about telling the story through the people. My friend, I'm Palestinian. I'm an American also, and I have been trying to visit my family in Gaza for the last 6 years. I couldn't do that because Israel will not allow me in that biggest open-air jail on the face of this earth, which is Gaza. My friend, my father passed away about 18 years ago. As a result, I inherited land that is not too far to the south of Tel Aviv. I have the papers for it. It's in the British archives, it's in the Turkish archives. My grandfather owned it, my father, now I own it. I cannot touch it. I cannot come near it because I'm not a Jew. If I was Jewish, I could have gone there and tomorrow became a citizen. My father died.
15 seconds, please get your question.
I couldn't be with him because that Gaza was sealed. Let someone in, let whoever they want to let in, and not let him in whenever they don't want to. And as a result, we have lived through misery under the Israeli occupation that still continues to date. Thank you, sir.
Anyone have? Just on a personal level, my friend is named, his father had a home which was blown up. This was many, many years ago. But perhaps after this, I can give you his name and his email, and perhaps, he's there. He lives in Israel now, and perhaps he might be able to give you some contacts that you can at least inquire. I don't know what can be done, but I can't. No. Do you know how much trouble I would get in? No. You can make dinner for me. No, but I will give you his name.
Anyone else on the panel have a comment? Okay.
How can Americans become more effective at demanding better journalism?
I think that's aimed at you, Peter.
That is really a core question. A lot. I think really the core answer to that one is to demand more of ourselves. We have a large population that doesn't vote. We do. We have a lot of people who don't quite. We have a complicated political system. We do. It's not a bad political system if everybody participates, but a lot of our people choose not to participate, and a lot of people are deliberately kept out of the political process for one reason or another, and it has been this way for decades. So if we demand more of ourselves, we can therefore in turn demand more of our political officials, our elected officials, and then in turn demand more of those who cover them. See, President Trump is a master at handling the media, because when he uses the word fake news, it really is an insult when you think about it. It's not really funny. I tell my students, look, what happens if I handed back an assignment to you and I say fake assignment? Or if somebody, like if any of you are in production or do anything like that, here, it's fake. You wouldn't feel good about it. But you have to continue doing our job. We have to continue doing our jobs even during the darkest hour, because there will be a payoff. Sometime, and I'm not telling you my political beliefs, but sometime the heroes are going to stand out. This can't last a lot longer than it has been. I've never seen political discourse, public discourse as low as it has been now. All of our problems would be a lot less. We would be able to solve our problems if people would listen more to each other. When we meet people on a personal level, generally people get along. If I come over to your house, we get along. We have a cup of coffee, and I'm sure you get along with Rick. Why can't we do this on a national level? This is what we need to do.
Reverend Mann?
Well, I think the media is a lackey of the corporate world. That's what I think. I think that's where the media is. It's run by capitalist pigs. That's what I think. And as long as that's going on, I remember in the civil rights movement down in the South and place, the media was an ally. I mean, those reporters were down in the guts of the gully, and they were down there reporting on what was going on by the little people, by the folks that was hurting and the folks that was organizing. This stuff they got on the media today, I could just about repeat it word for word before they ever even say it, because I know what they're going to say. They're lackeys for the corporate world. And America is living out who America is by electing Donald Trump. He is America. That is what America is. It is bought and paid for by the capitalists. I know what I'm talking about.
Just very, very quickly, as to accessibility, it may not be comfortable, but following people on Twitter and finding people on Facebook and using social media and organizing within your own communities, that is the way that you will learn about people's stories. That is how you will see what is happening on the ground in any situation and in any conflict. And one thing that we see over and over again, and this actually addresses an earlier question, there was a girl in Israel, a Palestinian girl who was just arrested and is now going to face charges, very, very, very difficult and hard to overcome charges because of a poem that she wrote on Facebook that is now going to be inciting violence and organized terror, et cetera, et cetera. We have one professor and one, I think the executive director of the Center for Constitutional Rights, that were just barred and shipped back to the United States, who tried to visit Israel. So, yeah, I mean, obviously, I hope they were trying to visit Palestine, but they were deported from Tel Aviv. Given what we have access to, the stories, the situations on a daily level that we have access to, we need to demand, but we also need to throw ourselves in there, as uncomfortable as it is, and get to know people and really follow their stories and see what the truth is behind them.
Can I comment on that? I think that's if we'd have had Facebook back in the 60s, this thing would have happened much quicker. I think you're absolutely right. Now, I was the first activist who had a portable telephone in Kansas City, Missouri. The thing was about this big. It had a big old thing came off of it like that. But we needed this thing because it was important to know how to connect like that. But you're right. If we'd have had that stuff back then, we're better off with that, I think. I'm not sure, but because it's a double-edged sword. You might have too much sugar. You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
All right. Yes. Go ahead, Tom.
Hi, I'm Tom Crane with Friends of Community Media, and this is a group which is very concerned about the manipulation of media in this country in particular, but around the world as well. And when you consider that over 90% of the media, it's probably quite a bit higher than that, are controlled by 5 corporations, I have to disagree with our journalist friend here saying that the media does not have a bias in some way. If we can look at Sinclair Broadcasting and what they're doing, or how the Koch brothers managed to get their right-wing opinions across. But also, there's a question for the panel. I was involved in the anti-apartheid struggle from South Africa, and there was a divestment campaign going on to get that regime to change its power. And I remember clearly that the people that were fighting for their freedom at that time were called terrorists in Zimbabwe, which was Rhodesia at that time, and South Africa. And my question is, would divestment campaign get Israel to change its behavior? And is, in fact, Israel an apartheid state?
A resounding yes.
All of you.
No.
From my perspective, a resounding yes. I think that the BDS campaign is one of the most effective strategies at, do I need it? Really?
Yeah.
One of the most effective strategies that we have in the non-violent strategies that we have in overcoming and toppling governments and in encouraging corporations that wouldn't otherwise be led in that direction to change their course. Corporations like CAT, and Hewlett-Packard, and Sabra Hummus, and Pepsi, and SodaStream, and the list goes on. There are so many companies that are on the list of BDS against the Israeli occupation that we need to take on to, and that we need to really spread that information so that people can really hit them where it hurts. As the Reverend said, it is corporate America. It's capitalism. It is imperialism. And we are the best friend of Israel. And Israel resides and lives and sucks the blood of capitalism, I think, just as much as the United States does. If we can hit them in their pockets, then it will hurt them eventually. Unfortunately, it is a long-standing conflict, and it is a long-standing solution to that conflict. So there are other things that can be done, but the BDS movement and the support of the BDS movement is definitely one place to start. And as to the question of apartheid, would you call a country that has 2 separate laws, one for Arab citizens and one for Jewish citizens, an apartheid state? Would you call a country that has separate roads for Israeli Jews and Arab Palestinians an apartheid state? Would you call one that literally controls access to food, water, agriculture, export, import, everything that you can possibly imagine that affects you on a day-to-day basis? Would you call that country an apartheid state? Absolutely. In no uncertain terms is Israel, our current modern day, worse than South Africa, apartheid state.
All right. Rick, did you want to say something, Rick?
Well, sure, I want to say something about that.
Okay.
Israel is in no way an apartheid state. It's an insult, like calling Israel Nazi. Israel is the victim of religious persecution, and Arabic is an official language of Israel. There is an Arab member of the Israeli Supreme Court. There are Arab parties in the Knesset. Was any of that true in South Africa? That's enough.
Well, the answer to your question is yes. Those things work. Boycotts work. And you cut off the money, you cut off the honey, if you know what I'm talking about. You do that. I was a part of the South African apartheid network when we cut it off with Shell Oil Company. That's how we started. I remember that. So if you got an issue, you cut off the money, you boycott, what was the word? I forget the word you use. You divest. You divest. Now, good luck, because I don't think you're going to get much, because they all of them in bed with each other right now, as I look at it. But I think if you want to lead a movement, that is one of the best ways to get it done, is to do the divestment thing. And anybody that's sleeping in the bed with Donald Trump, we need to divest on that, man. That's a hint right there where Netanyahu is leaning. Am I right or wrong?
Okay.
Go ahead. Next question.
Okay.
I just would like to, just very short.
Sorry?
I'm waiting for my wife to, see, there's a phrase in Zulu, and Nelson Mandela applied it, even though he speaks Xhosa, which is very close to Zulu. The approach that they followed after, when the apartheid system collapsed. And Ubuntu is a spiritual philosophy, which means, well, if I can explain it, it's a person is a person through other people. And that means that you have to support each other in order for things to work, even if you don't like each other. Doesn't mean that, I mean, the view can be is that whites don't have to like blacks particularly, or Palestinians don't have to like Jews and vice versa. They don't have to like each other. It doesn't matter. What matters is that people don't threaten each other. Because if the threat is taken away, then you clear the playing field, and then perhaps people can begin to like each other. But I mean, a lot has to happen. I can't go in there and say, well, I've got all these great ideas. I mean, I never would have gone to Zimbabwe when it was Rhodesia, because I don't know what the situation was really like there. And one thing that I've learned about spending a lot of time in Ethiopia, where Muslims really get along well with Ethiopian Christians, is they don't like people who are not familiar or not too familiar with their cultures coming and thinking that they know what to do. And I don't mean, I'm not judging you at all, please understand that. And but because I got in trouble a few times, I got in trouble. So I became very careful when I got older. You know, allow people to nurture and find their own solutions. You know, two of you get together. And I'm not a lackey. I didn't like that at all.
So, I mean, this ain't about liking nobody. This is about exerting power against somebody who's messing somebody over.
Who's going to do the exerting?
You do. You don't buy their product. When we boycotted Shell Oil, I'm looking for the word. I can't think of the word. Divestment. When we divested in Shell Oil and we got people to stop investing their retirement funds and all of those things, man, the people paid attention. Okay, it didn't have nothing to do with whether I liked them or not. By the way, I've got a tapestry hanging in my room from Swaziland. The thing is 9 by 11. It's a huge thing.
Okay, I'd like to see that.
Right after he got out of jail.
Oh, you did?
All right.
That's really something.
Okay.
Let's go to the next question, please.
All right. You know, we are talking about a very intense situation. And I know that there are people on all sides who are working for peace, too. I mean, I get emails from Jewish Voice for Peace. I get emails from U.S. Campaign. I get emails from Christian peacemaker teams. And so I get a little view of what's happening there. But it seems like the groundwork for all this thing is that there are two problems. One problem is a lack of awareness. The other problem, forgive me, is a lack of compassion. And we are not willing to walk in each other's shoes enough. How do we increase the awareness and the ability to walk in other people's shoes within this country so that perhaps we can stretch out to other people with that same way?
You go ahead. I don't know the answer to that question. Where's the Reverend?
The thing is, a lot of people ain't got shoes. And, I got this idea. We have won the war here. The progressive voice has won the war. Donald Trump is a thrashing beast on his last legs. You know what we don't know how to do? We don't know how to take the ground. You understand what I'm trying to say? We don't know how to take the ground. It ain't a matter of compassion. It's a matter of doing something that knows how to take the ground. You could take the coalition that elected Barack Obama and pull that coalition together, we got 10 times more votes than they got money. But we don't do that. You understand what I'm trying to say? It's time for us to take the ground, the progressive voice to take the ground. It ain't a matter of walking in anybody's shoes. It's a matter of getting everybody to get a pair of shoes. You understand what I'm saying? That's what I think.
Okay.
Well,
all right, next question.
I would add another word to what she has said, and that's trust. And I'd also add the word leadership. And many of you may say, well, the Holocaust happened a long time ago,
I know.
But it ripples down through the ages. If you are Jewish or you have Jewish connections, you no doubt had grandparents, aunts, uncles, brothers, sisters who died in the Holocaust. There were some 6 million Jews who were systematically killed. My son-in-law's grandfather escaped from Auschwitz. His wife and 2 children died there. He lived in the mountains in Poland for 2 years. He went back to find his business in Krakow. It was gone. Somebody else took over his business. His home was gone. His brothers and sisters had been killed. His parents had been killed. As I said, his wife and 2 children. He went into Germany. The Jewish Distribution Committee. How many of you people know what the Jewish Distribution Committee is? Okay. He was finally he married another woman.
All right, 15 seconds, please get to your question.
So the Holocaust has everything to do with what's happened in Israel. Now I want to go to what Mahmoud Abbas said earlier this week. What he said was reprehensible. He accused the Jews of conspiring with the Nazis in carrying out the Holocaust against their own people. Not true.
Please get to your question.
How would you change the leadership of the Palestinian National Council so that you don't have someone who is obviously a hater of Jews, who's a Holocaust denier, and has wrote about that in his 1982 doctoral dissertation? How would you change that leadership so you could get trust?
And I apologize, and I'm very sorry for the historical struggle that your family has gone through. And I think that, again, the Holocaust was a reprehensible time in our history. That said, the Holocaust has nothing to do with what is happening in Israel. What happened is that a victimized people with a destroyed psyche descended upon a place where natives lived and thrived, but who lacked, unfortunately, at that time, the leadership because of colonization, and swept in and, like I said, formed gangs and formed terrorist organizations that then, with the hand in hand with the political ideology of Zionism, drove out nearly 1 million Palestinians, murdered hundreds of thousands of people, stole land, destroyed crops, and basically prevented from returning, people who were native to this land for centuries. And the Palestinians themselves had absolutely nothing to do with the Holocaust. They had absolutely nothing to do with the Holocaust. They had nothing to do with the war. They had no hand in this. They did not benefit from it, and they didn't lack from it. That said, what can we do about the Zionist leaders that are currently in power in Israel and beyond, here in the United States as well? How can we transform their conversations and their dialogue about peace so that it is compassionate and that it is equal and that it is in tune with what is actually happening on the ground? I am not a supporter of Mahmoud Abbas, and I'm actually unfamiliar with these comments, but I will say that there is documented evidence that certain parts of the World Zionist organizations did collude with the Third Reich to allow certain Jews to leave in exchange for the Jewish people to not protest in Germany and for them to leave, that they would go directly to Palestine. That is documented. And that's an unbiased, perspective. But that is collusion, and it is collusion from maybe a few, but it is collusion with the Zionist organization, with the Third Reich, in order to take people out of Germany, the Jewish people out of Germany and out of Poland, and then transport them to Palestine with the express intent to create a Jewish state in a Palestinian homeland. So I appreciate your question, and I appreciate, again, your family's history of struggle. But again, it does not justify, and it is not relevant when talking about the harm and the terror that is done to the Palestinians on a daily basis living under occupation, and especially when it comes to places like Gaza. That are literally, as Brother Fadi said earlier, living in an open-air prison, most of the population is displaced from other parts of Palestine.
Okay, anyone else?
Yes, the Palestinians didn't commit the Holocaust. The Mufti of Jerusalem did meet with Hitler and encouraged him. But that's only the greatest example of anti-Semitism throughout history. And it's anti-Semitism throughout history, through thousands of years, through Europe, through the Arab lands that gave rise to Zionism.
We are Semite and you are not.
That's a semantic argument. Get out of here.
You are not Semite, I'm a Semite.
All right. Next question. Before we start the next question, it is after 9 o'clock. I think we were supposed to end at around 8:30. So we're going to ask you to ask your question, and
I'm sorry for what's happening to Palestinian people. It's atrocious. It really is. As a retired police officer, my theory is the IDF, the very people we saw on the screen doing what they were doing, the Palestinians, are coming over here and training our police forces. Now, the biggest important deal here, guys, you're not going to figure this out. You're not going to get the Israelis to quit doing this to you until you read in their most holy book, the Talmud, what it says about all of us that are not Jews. Okay? We're cattle. We are to be harvested. And we will be harvested till they're done. Now, you boys are going to have to get real slick on your apologetics, because people are starting to wake up to who set the explosives in the Twin Towers, all three of them, and brought them down. Okay. All right? Just like they're getting wise to the USS Liberty in 1967.
Do you have a question?
I think we have to get back to where, we have a lot of, part of it is because of what is going on with this fake news stuff. And it's a matter of trust. Somebody said the word trust. We have to trust each other, because if we lose trust in each other, we're going to lose a lot of stuff. And we're going to get comments like that. Excuse me, sir, I lost a second cousin in 9/11. His name was Vincent Morello, and he was a firefighter. I don't believe in the conspiracy theory. These buildings collapsed because planes were flown into them, okay? That's the way it happened. You can believe what you would like to believe. I also know reporters who were at the scene. It would have been too big. There were so many eyes on that. 500,000 people saw this happen, okay?
I'm very well schooled on this. Over 200 documents on it.
Okay.
All right.
No. Please. Let's remain civil. I think that's, everybody needs a chance to talk. This is what the framers of the Constitution wanted. They wanted the town hall meeting where there would be healthy discourse and where the truth would prevail. And hopefully the truth will prevail, because this is what we need. Okay? And this is where journalism plays a role, because if journalism is damaged in this country or any other country, and there are many, many democracies in the world, you will not have a democracy. I've covered a lot of countries, and I've been a Fulbright scholar in countries where there is no democracy. So it's a precious thing. So let's build up what we have, okay?
We don't have a democracy.
I think we do. I think we do. We're misusing it. I've been to plenty of countries, including socialist countries.
I travel all over. We don't have a democracy here. We got a corporate board meeting.
Well, then vote, okay, and change it.
Look, man, I've been there 3 or 4 petition drives. Matter of fact,
I'm out here dealing with, I'm circumventing city council and all them people to get the people to vote. I got a petition right here I want you to sign before you go. Anybody to sign. But the point is to say we got a democracy here. This land was created in a document that only the white landowning men could vote when the thing was invented. I mean, you can't tell me that's a democracy. That ain't no democracy.
Well, look at the rest of the world.
What the hell with the rest of the world?
Okay.
All right.
Next question, please.
For my panel, including the moderator, which one of you guys are Jewish? Okay, nobody else?
Can you speak out louder?
Okay, so you're the only Jew here on the panel? Okay, and you're here to represent Israel, I assume? Okay. Well, no, here's the thing. You know, a religion, one of the aspects of all religion is that, you know, if you're a Methodist or you're a Baptist or whatever, you think you're the best. You think you've got the answer on the next world. But when a religion is combined with a race, you not only think that you're morally superior, you think that you're a superior race.
What's your question?
And so the point is this. Israel is the manifestation of what Judaism is. Judaism believes in racial supremacy, moral supremacy. They're a political movement masquerading as a religion, and they're anti-Christian. People in this country don't realize that even a Jew who would convert to Christianity would not be permitted to immigrate to Israel because it is exclusive for Jews only.
Please ask a question. Do you have a question?
You know, and with regards to building, you know, 9/11, you go to building number 7.
Sir,
the guys,
you know, 9/11 isn't the subject.
I'm going to
the subject is the movie, and I wish we would get back to that. If you have a question, ask it.
Here's the thing: we're about ready. You know, we've seen this thing, and when
sir. If you have a question, ask it.
We are about
hand the microphone to the next person, please.
When you see this film,
sir,
would you let me ask a question?
Sir.
All right? Let me ask a question.
We have, all right, please. That's what I'm telling you.
We just had this film about what's going on in Israel. But we're about to go to war in the Middle East. And what's that about? Who's responsible for us? And how do you guys feel about Syria? Do you think Syria is somehow a threat to Israel, or do you support Syria?
Okay, that's your question. Please let the panel answer and hand the microphone to the next person. You've had more time than anyone else asking your question. Please pass the microphone on.
I just want. There's so much of what you said, and I think really it's kind of unfair. But I have two ways.
You gotta get the microphone.
Okay. I have two ways of answering that. First, you know, I took one of those swab tests a long time ago to find out where my family came from. Everybody says I'm Italian. But I found out 13,000 years ago, one side of my family originated from Syria, what is now Syria. 9,000 years ago, the other part was from Syria. And I have a feeling that most of us, because that was where the land bridge was, so genetically, only 6 genes out of 100,000 determine race. Only 6. So let's try to think of the rest of the 100,000. I mean, really, I mean, like what? I think that it's just sort of like we're getting worked up where we shouldn't be. We should try to find out where we find common ground. I mean, we don't have to go to war if we don't want to. I've seen it firsthand, okay?
You're talking about capitalism and the capitalist controlled media. The Jews control every network.
They do not. I can tell you.
They control CNN, NBC, CBS.
All right.
Okay, I will tell you that none of my reports, I'll just make a point, none of my reports, I'm telling you right now, I'm just telling, this is fact. It's not fake, it's fact. All of my reports that I've ever done, and I've done more than 1,000, okay, you walk out, that's okay, you don't want to hear the truth. All of my reports went directly from where I did them to TV, okay?
I would just say that anti-Semitism is worse than it's ever been in my lifetime.
You can't equate anti-Semitism with criticism of Israel. The two are not supposed to be equated. I'm not responding. I think I do, actually. Thank you very much. No, I understand that it is the reflex of most people to automatically call out and say anti-Semitism every time a criticism of Israel is brought forward. What needs to happen is the occupation of Palestine needs to end, and the right of return for refugees needs to happen in our lifetime. That is what needs to happen. And in doing so, you will have more security in Israel. You will not have a massive exodus of Jewish people from the Israeli lands right now, from Palestine, I should say. You will not have those things. There is a way to guarantee the safety, the security, the livelihood, the well-being, and the future happiness of generations to come for both sides of the conflict. But it will not happen if every single time a criticism of Israel is made, a knee-jerk response is to say anti-Semitism. And I'm not responding to that guy's comments, and I'm not responding to what he said about the media. I'm talking
about
specifically.
something totally different than what just occurred.
I'm talking about the fact that you've used the word anti-Semitism about a dozen times since we've sat here tonight.
You're answering the question you want to answer, not the question that was asked or the anti-Semitism that was displayed.
I'm responding specifically to the word anti-Semitism.
Okay. Next questioner, please.
Thank you, everyone, for your time today, especially the audience. I know it's been a long night. I want to bring this up because it hasn't been mentioned so far. The United States gives Israel a lot of assistance, a lot of military assistance, $3.6 billion in the last year, and that's the average that we give almost every year. Is that a good use of our tax money as taxpayers? What is your guys' comments on that?
The answer to your question is no.
Before you finish or answer that, I want to say the man at the end is the last questioner. Because we do need to vacate the building here at some point. So go ahead and answer. We're not going to solve it.
Again, no, absolutely not. We have enough problems in this country as it is. We have homeless veterans who are sleeping on the street. We have overcrowded shelters. We have children that go hungry every single night. We have teachers who are underpaid, hospitals that are understaffed, people who do not have access to free education. There are 1,000 things in the United States that we could work on with that money rather than sending it to one of the most powerful countries on earth with one of the most powerful militaries on earth. In addition to that, we could stop subsidizing all of the military aid that goes to Israel and stop subsidizing military aid, in that fact, to Saudi Arabia and other such countries that commit human rights atrocities all over the globe and who are killing women, children, men, the elderly, bombing hospitals, bombing schools, and really causing terrorism in this world. And we are funding it every single day with our taxpayer dollars. And what we need to do is to stand up and say no more. What we need to do is actually get elected officials at the local level and again at the national level that will stop sending our money, including the city of Leawood, Kansas, to Israel to support settlements and military expansion of the occupation and the repression of the Palestinian people.
Sam? No, Sam wanted to say something.
Yeah, I don't know. It just occurred to me that there's a 40% vote that'll vote for Trump if he shot somebody on Broadway or something. And them 39, 40%, they are and I just came up with this, and I think I'm right about it. But they support Netanyahu. You understand what I'm saying? They support Israel. There's something wrong with that. Am I right or wrong? There's something. That just seems like something on the street to me. It's something wrong with that, and we ought to do something about that. Which is all of us get together, the progressive voice, get together, because we can kick their booty if we get together. I know what I'm talking about.
All right, Peter, do you want to say something?
Yeah, just about the 39 or 40%. I mean, there's been a lot of twisting about the middle-aged, older white guys who always vote for
women too.
Yeah, that's true. College-educated as well.
Got white women in it.
But did reporters go to those places, to the trailer courts, and to find out why or what worries these guys?
Not until after the election.
You know, did they try? Did anybody suggest that Hillary go there and campaign in some of these places? I mean, if I were an advisor, I would have said go there. They may not like you, but they will respect you. Yeah, I screwed up on those emails, but I hear you, and I promise I will be ethical, and you can trust me.
Okay, next question.
Okay.
I got like a two-part question, kind of. The first one is, you know, as Palestinians, when we protest in violence, obviously we are reprimanded and punished. And even when we respond in nonviolence, we are reprimanded and punished, including the BDS movement. You know, even just recently in Kansas, there's been legislation to battle the BDS movement. What do you guys think about that and what it says about the American democracy? And two, I'm a Palestinian. I have second and third cousins who are Christian. I am Muslim, and I have first cousins who are Jews. You know, to me, that is Palestine. We are the land of the three religions. We are the land of there is no God but God, whatever religion you do come from. And in my eyes, you know, I believe in one Palestine that accepts Muslims, Christians, and Jews no matter what. I'm against Zionism. I am not against Jews. But I believe that the future of Palestine is to end the occupation. What are your thoughts on that? Thank you.
The future is what with regard to the occupation?
The future, I believe in a Palestine, one united Palestine that includes the Jews who are there already, the Palestinians that are here, there, and abroad, and the Christian Palestinians as well, regardless of religion, regardless of race.
A one-state solution is what you.
I believe that.
Prefer.
Yes.
That's a legitimate.
Simply because I believe the two-state solution is shambles.
I agree. The two-state peace process is dead. It's moribund. It's agonizing. It's, you know, all that. I would just tell you that I stood up at the board meeting of the JCRB and told them I did not agree with this anti-BDS legislation that they passed in Missouri and Kansas. It's anti-American. You should be allowed to criticize and boycott whoever you want without punishment.
Hi, this is on a, first of all, I have a question, but this is first on a personal note. As an American Jew, I would love to have every Palestinian person living here come to my house and get to know you. I lived in Pakistan for a year, and it was like a love fest. People were so kind to me that I just can't tell you. What my question is, and since the earliest days, leaders of the Zionist movement have called for the integration of Arab populations in Israel. About 20% of the Israeli population is not Jewish, putting an instant lie to the claim that that Palestinians aren't welcome. So my question is, do people know that the Zionist movement wanted an integration early on?
Well, you know, the Zionist movement, it's about the state for the Jews. Did the Zionists kick out the Arabs? Yes, they did. Is there an Arab minority in Israel today? Yes, there is. Do they have rights? Yes, they do. Are they equal to Jews? No, they're not. And, it's complicated. And yeah, I don't know. I'm sorry, I lost my train of thought.
Maybe my question wasn't very good.
It's been a long night. Fatima?
I think that the Israeli government has everything that they need in their power to be able to resolve this situation. I really do. And I think out of that, the Palestinian leadership will also step up to the plate and be present and be forthcoming in creating a long-term lasting solution. That said, the United States has been the worst broker for peace in the Middle East, I think, and we have not allowed for any other organization, including the United Nations, to help broker any sort of a lasting peace. So if the big guys, the dumb guys, would get out of the way and allow for the true leaders in each community to step forward and try to come to a resolution, I think that might work. That said, Zionism, I believe, at its core, in its ideology, is one that is inherently non-integrationist and that is inherently racist, and that it is inherently, as Rick said, focused on finding a state for the Jewish people at any expense.
Okay, sir.
I am happy to be here. My mother marched with Dr. Martin. My mother did march with Dr. Martin Luther King. She also, my parents marched against World War II. I'm a Vietnam veteran, a Purple Heart. So I'm the black sheep in the family, like some of you feel who are a minority also. But today is the National Day of Prayer, and I want to share one with you. A veteran asked a little boy if he said his prayers every night. Yes, sir, the boy replied. And do you always say them in the morning too? The chaplain asked. No, sir, the boy replied. I ain't scared in the daytime. What we're dealing with in all of our conversation tonight is that there is a part of us, just like little boys and little girls, that have real fears about real events. And the bottom line where peace comes from is by asking God for it, however you address him, in anger or in frustration or in love, or by glorifying him. And we must do that as a nation to answer most of the questions I've heard before me. So I would encourage that to happen. That's the end of my comments.
Can't hear you. Okay, thanks for your service.
And I have one last question, or it's not a question, it's just a comment. I think we hear Fatima's baby. I think this is the end. And thank you so much for being here, our panelists. And I thought there were some notable exceptions, but in general, thank you all. It was a very civil discussion with a few.
And there's a pair of glasses that I found on the floor back here, and I don't know if anyone still here owns them.
Thank you all. Thank you to all of our panelists. Fatima, move ahead. I said that wrong. Sam Mann, Rick Hellman, and Peter Morello. Thank you all. No, I don't think there is going to be another one next month. I don't know. I'm not part of the CJME, so you'll have to ask Margot.